ITV drama premieres with HSBC, world-class drama with the world's local bank.
You all right?
Yeah, just... Okay, well, look, tell me.
What's that?
It's a smiley face to cheer you up.
It's not smiling.
No. Going who?
Oh.
Oh. Cheer up, Sue.
Right.
Rimmel's new Extreme Definition Comb Mascara. Break the rules. Its comb defines and separates every lash from root to tip. For a look as individual as you are. Extreme Definition Comb Mascara from Rimmel London.
Back pain affects over 16 million people a year in the UK. Yet appropriate treatment could work wonders. In over 90% of cases, surgery is unnecessary. At Bupa, we have teams of highly experienced specialists dedicated to the assessment, treatment and care of your back. We have a range of ways to help straighten you out, from health checks to back clinics to hospital treatment. Whether or not you choose to become a Bupa member, call 0800 00 1010.
Let's get lost in each other's arms. Let's get lost.
And this way the skin gets really crispy and, well, just really, really chickeny. See, it's fun helping Mummy, isn't it?
No.
So if you add an OXO vegetable cube to the rice, it really gives it flavour.
What kind of flavour?
What kind of flavour do you think?
Ox?
Yeah, it's the OXO. The chicken's in play. It's browning nicely. It's gonna be a triumph. It is. He's done it. King of the stir fry.
Special report into the war on terror in 15 minutes after the ITV Evening News with Trevor McDonald.
Revealed in Campbell's diary his desperation to crush Gilligan. Boxer Frank Bruno is rushed to a mental hospital.
And I just hope that he gets better. He was a national hero and everybody loves him, everybody still loves him. They just want to make sure that he's going to be okay again.
Double life of a monster, Spain's serial killer suspect. And after this brawl, players face an inquiry.
The ITV News at 10 with Trevor McDonald.
Good evening. Extracts from the secret diary of Alistair Campbell were made public at the Hutton inquiry today, and they showed just how keen the government was to identify Dr. David Kelly to help them undermine the BBC reporter Andrew Gilligan. Mr. Campbell didn't put it quite like that in his diary. He used the F word to describe what he hoped to do to Mr. Gilligan's credibility. John Ray followed the inquiry today. John?
Like all the best diaries, this one contains intimate and embarrassing secrets. It reveals that Alistair Campbell was determined to get Andrew Gilligan. It reveals that he wanted David Kelly named as the source for the BBC story. And worse than that, Trevor, using a four-letter word, he says he hoped all this would crush Mr. Gilligan.
Words are weapons he usually deploys with devastating effect against opponents. But today, Alistair Campbell's words bit back and stung a government accused of using Dr. Kelly to wage war on the BBC. In his Downing Street diary, he records his delight when Dr. Kelly first admitted meeting the journalist Andrew Gilligan. It was double-edged, but Jeff Hoon and I agreed it would Gilligan if that was his source. Counsel to the inquiry, James Dingemans, led the questions. That seems to suggest a certain strength of feeling you had about Mr. Gilligan. Beginning to look uncomfortable, Mr. Campbell replied, "I don't deny it. I was very, very angry and frustrated about this whole situation." The diary records it was an anger others shared. Jeff Hoon said he was almost as steamed up as I was. Tony Blair said he didn't want to push the system too far, but my worry was I wanted a clear win, not a messy draw. To win, the government needed Dr. Kelly to publicly contradict the BBC's story about sexed-up dossiers. Journalists were given clues about his identity. In his diary, Mr. Campbell reveals how keen he was that Dr. Kelly's name be made known. The biggest thing needed was the source out. We agreed that we should not do it ourselves, but later in the day, the FT, Guardian and the Times got the name. Counsel to the inquiry asked, so in government circles it was recognised that it would assist them to have Dr. Kelly's name out. Is that fair? That was my view, although qualified by the observation it was never going to be unalloyed good news for Dr. Kelly to appear in public. In the diary, Jeff Hoon is portrayed as a willing partner. His car slipped past the protesters, lying in wait for his second appearance at the inquiry. But in court, the Defence Secretary went on the attack, denying any plan to leak Dr. Kelly's name. There is not the slightest shred of evidence for that assertion. Learned counsel is suggesting there was some sort of conspiracy right across government. As far as I was concerned, there was no conspiracy. He had mounted a robust self-defence, but Mr. Hoon will know the contents of Alistair Campbell's diary do not help his chances of survival.
John, is it possible to make a calculation about how damaging these revelations are to the government?
We can make one certain calculation that these diaries are already said to be worth hundreds of thousands of pounds to a publisher. The good news for Alistair Campbell is, I suppose, the value, Trevor, has just gone up. The bad news, the very bad news for the government, though, is that they will now be counting the cost to their credibility. Do you know, for all the well-rehearsed denials of any wrongdoing, what we get from the diary is a real sense in very raw language of a determination to use David Kelly as a battering ram to beat the BBC. What there isn't, frankly, is much regard in there for the well-being of Dr. Kelly himself. The bad news for Jeff Hoon is he is portrayed as an enthusiastic supporter in all this. So if the inquiry demands a political sacrifice, if public opinion demands a political sacrifice, then Jeff Hoon knows that he really is next in line for that.
John Ray, thank you. Police hunting the killer of 7-year-old Tony Ann Byfield have arrested a 28-year-old woman tonight. Tony Ann and her father Bertram, a convicted drug dealer, were shot dead at his bedsit in northwest London 9 days ago. The woman is being questioned about both murders at a nearby police station, but the detective gave no other details about tonight's arrest. One of this country's best-loved sportsmen, Frank Bruno, is in a mental hospital tonight. The former heavyweight boxing champion was taken away from his home by ambulance crews with police help. He's apparently suffering from depression. Always conscious of his fans, Bruno sent them a message tonight. He told them not to worry, he simply needs a rest. Helen Wright reports.
A larger-than-life personality in and out of the boxing ring, Frank Bruno is tonight fighting for his mental health. He was driven by ambulance for treatment at a London psychiatric hospital after police were called to help paramedics remove the ex-boxer from his luxury Essex home. Earlier this summer, the former world champion reportedly turned to the Priory Clinic for help with depression. Tonight, a police source says Bruno is in another hospital under the terms of mental health legislation.
It's not actually a way of condemning or convicting somebody. It's a way of getting help to people who become so disturbed and so distressed that they don't think they need that help.
Thank you very much.
When Frank Bruno challenged Iron Mike Tyson, defeat did not diminish the affection in which he was held. And he truly captured British hearts when he became WBC World Heavyweight Champion in 1995. Retirement brought stage and then screen success. But divorce from wife Laura 2 years ago reportedly hit Bruno hard, coupled with the difficulties of retirement from a high-profile career.
A lot of fighters need counselling when their careers are over. Frank fits into that category, knowing the sort of guy that he is, the sensitive soul that he is. I know that he needed counselling, and I know he's been having counselling, but it almost happened too late for him.
Bruno recently talked of a boxing comeback and even applied to get his licence reinstated. Tonight his spokesman told ITV News he doesn't want his fans to worry. Frank is fine, he said. He just needs some rest and will be out soon. Helen Wright, ITV News.
A doctor has pleaded guilty to the unlawful killing of Wayne Jowett. He was the 18-year-old leukemia patient who died after a medical blunder. Drugs were injected into his spine instead of into a vein. Dr. Feda Mulhem gave the fatal order 3 years ago. Wayne died a month later. The Norfolk farmer Tony Martin has accepted an offer from a burglar he shot and wounded to drop a claim for damages against him. In return, Brendan Farron has decided not to sue Mr. Martin. And low-tar cigarettes are death repackaged. That's the stark message behind a new anti-smoking campaign that's being launched tomorrow. It warns that mild or light cigarettes can cause cancer, just like other varieties. Police are trying to determine whether a man arrested in Spain is in fact a serial strangler who's returned to violence after a 10-year sentence. Tony King has told Spanish police that he killed 2 teenage girls. DNA tests are being done to see if he might also be Tony Bromwich, the Holloway strangler. From Spain, Juliet Bremner reports.
Mocked and jeered by a hostile crowd, this is the British barman who's brought bloodshed and fear to Spain's Costa del Sol. Murderer, they scream as Tony King is led away from a police station after confessing to 2 murders and 3 rapes. King was caught when his blood was found in a car close to the spot where 17-year-old Sonia Carabante's body was found. His DNA on a cigarette butt linked him to waste ground in Mijas and the killing 4 years ago of 19-year-old Rocio Waninkoff, who was an au pair for a British family.
If it turns out that it's this man King who killed both Rocio and the girl in Coen and the other girls that have gone missing in the meantime, I will be very pleased that they've now taken him off the streets.
But in his adopted town of Aloin El Grande, there's fury. 38-year-old King was arrested at the school where his Spanish wife works. When King came here 6 years ago, he was running away from a criminal past. He told no one about the time he'd spent in jail for strangling and sexually assaulting 5 women. Instead, he changed his name and took a job as a barman. Now in Aloin El Grande, they're talking about the double life of a monster. In Britain, King, then called Tony Bromwich, was nicknamed the Holloway Strangler. He served a jail sentence in the UK for attempting to kill a series of women. For the Spanish, who treated him as a friend, it's a betrayal that's hard to bear. Juliet Bremner, ITV News, Malaga.
Arsenal Football Club and 5 Arsenal players face Football Association charges after the violent end to yesterday's match against Manchester United. The FA is studying pictures of Arsenal players launching themselves at United's Ruud van Nistelrooy. The incident has damaged the image of football and some of its highest paid players.
When the game ends up and erupts like it did on Sunday, then it's every excuse and opportunity for people to say that is setting the wrong example, and it's very hard to defend.
A reminder of tonight's headlines. Alistair Campbell's diaries have revealed how determined the government were to undermine the BBC reporter Andrew Gilligan. And the former boxing champion Frank Bruno is tonight being treated in a mental hospital. We're ending our program tonight with an update on the investigation into the death of our colleague Terry Lloyd. He was killed 6 months ago today in Iraq. His cameraman Fred Nerak and translator Hussein Osman disappeared and have not been seen since. The Ministry of Defence here are investigating. Bill Neely reports.
It's 6 months since Terry Lloyd looked towards Basra and a scoop, and with his 3 colleagues drove for it fast. Only one came home. From the fog of the war's second day, a few facts. Terry was hit in crossfire by an Iraqi bullet. Then as he was taken from this scene in a minibus, he was struck by a second American bullet and died. His cameraman Fred Nerak and translator Hussein Osman have simply disappeared. British military investigators have dug for bodies and evidence in Iraq, but have found little.
Up to this time, we've interviewed in excess of 300 potential witnesses, which have consisted of Iraqi people, coalition forces, together with other civilians of other nationalities.
Remarkably, this is Saddam Hussein discussing the incident, one of the final shots of the Iraqi leader before his overthrow. A TV car from Kuwait, says the general. Yes, as normal, says Saddam. For Fred Nerak's wife and 2 children, nothing is normal anymore.
No, I think it's impossible because you're never certain. Even if some days I assume it and I say, okay, it's 6 months now, it's too long, so he's dead, and that reason why we can't find him, and next day I think differently. So no, it's impossible. Even if, we have to find him, and in any condition we have to find him.
The British military search for Fred and Hussein goes on. Tonight their grieving families struggle on without answers. Bill Neely, ITV News.
The continuing investigation into the death of our colleagues. And that's it tonight. Join me again in a moment on the ITV News channel for the Tonight programme's investigation into sex tourism. But from News at 10. Good night.
ITV National Weather, sponsored by Powergen. Powergen, power in good hands.
Hello there. So a lot of the heavy rain would have thankfully cleared away from the east. So mainly dry, clear skies tonight. Perhaps a few showers up there across northern parts. Chilly everywhere tonight. Temperatures down into single figures. Perhaps even a touch of ground frost. So as you can imagine, a bit of a chilly start first thing tomorrow, but otherwise fine and bright. Some really good spells of sunshine around. Still perhaps a few showers up in the northeast of Scotland and the Northern Isles, although the emphasis really is on dry, fine weather. Now, despite that sunshine, temperatures really struggling tomorrow for a lot of places. Temperatures only getting up to around low teens. I think top of the league, the best of the temperatures really down here in the south, 18 Celsius, or in Fahrenheit, that's 64. I'll see you soon.
Powergen, power in good hands.
Cage, Jolie, the ITV1 movie premiere. Gone in 60 seconds, Wednesday at 9.
Scenic. Park the TV.
It's not just the advanced technology, the 45 patents, or the world-class blades. It's the way it's all put together. And no razor is built better than Gillette Mach 3 Turbo. 20 million men know it's the closest, most comfortable shave. Mach 3 Turbo from Gillette, the best a man can get.
May God bless and protect our just and noble King. Never was there a gentler monarch.
This is ITV1. Now a hard-hitting special report into the war on terror. Award-winning journalist John Pilger breaking the silence.
As we and our coalition partners are doing in Afghanistan, we will bring to the Iraqi people food and medicines and supplies and freedom.
So I believe that this is a fight for freedom. And I want to make it a fight for justice too.
We have shown freedom's power. And in this great conflict, my fellow Americans, we will see freedom's victory.
September the 11th, 2001, dominates almost everything we watch, read and hear. We're fighting a war on terror, say George Bush and Tony Blair, a noble war against evil itself. But what are the real aims of this war? And who are the most threatening terrorists? Indeed, who is responsible for far greater acts of violence than those committed by the fanatics of Al-Qaeda, crimes that have claimed many more lives than September the 11th, and always in poor, devastated, faraway places from Latin America to Southeast Asia? The answer to these questions is to be found here in the United States, where those now in power speak openly of their conquests and of endless war. Afghanistan, Iraq, these, they say, are just a beginning. Look out North Korea, Iran, even China. This film is about the rise and rise of rapacious imperial power and a terrorism that never speaks its name because it is our terrorism.
This is Afghanistan, and this woman's name is Orifa. In October 2001, an American plane dropped a 500-pound bomb on her mud and stone house. 8 members of her family were killed, including 6 children. 2 children died next door.
یعنی ما 8 نفر بسته 10 نفر بسته از اینجا از بین رفته 3 نفر بسته زخمی برآمده نه بر ما خانه مون نه زندگی مون نه نفر مون چیز نمون بچه ما یه جواد است یه دیگه دخترکش از این خویی وی یک آدم است یه از بین رفته یه از بین رفته این دخترک اینجا که سیر میکنه یه از بین رفته این دخترای جوان از بین رفته این شوهر ماستم باز آمدم که برای صورت ازی سعی کردم که بسته روی ازی بسته این مستر کله ازی بخی پوچاک شده یکی سینهش یکی تیکه پارچه شده دستش یکم تیکه تیکه شده بچه خود مرا میبینی کل ازی بستم تو دم کرده پوچی کرده دخترها یکیش این دختر بسته سوخته بود یک دختر دیگه بیخی بسته بیخی دمی روی بسته دمی روی ازی در روی میکت بیخی چسبیده بود گوشتش هم تو مابین پلاستیک جمع کرده شد این دخترک گردنش بسته سرش نبوده انباخم بسته صورت تخته پشتش رفته بود صورتش معلوم میشده.
Afghanistan was claimed as the first victory in America's war on terror against Islamic fundamentalists known as Al-Qaeda, the group responsible for the attacks of September the 11th. The Taliban regime in Afghanistan had given Osama bin Laden a base, but bin Laden and the Taliban leader were never caught. Instead, more than 3,000 innocent people were bombed to death. That's more than were killed on September the 11th. President Bush calls this Operation Enduring Freedom.
امریکا دا چی حالت چی روز بر ما ورده خانه منم از بین برده نفر ما کل بسته کل زندگی ما از بین برده چی کنیم این حالت دیگه کس که خوب است برای شازاتی منه که میگم ما خوش هستیم برای ما شب روز ما به غم است.
A world away in New York. This is Rita Lazar and her brother Abe. Abe was killed in the Twin Towers on September the 11th. He might have saved himself, but chose to help a disabled friend.
My view does not look out on the World Trade Center, but I'm on the 15th floor in Lower Manhattan, and I ran across the hall to my friend's apartment, and her windows looked out on the World Trade Center, and I got there in time to see the second plane hit the second building. And strangely enough, it was only then that I said, oh my God, my brother's in that building. Danny, my son's best friend called and said, "Can I come over?" And we said, "Sure." And he said, "Did you watch the president's speech?" And we said, "No." And he said, "He mentioned your brother." And I looked at him and I said, "What are you talking about?" And then I thought, gee, there must have been a lot of people who stayed behind with their friends in wheelchairs. You know, you don't think that it's your own brother. You don't think that. But it was my brother. And immediately I knew that my country was going to use my brother's death to justify killing innocent people in Afghanistan and wherever else they would look.
Rita decided to go to Afghanistan to comfort the victims of the American bombing. She met Orifa and took her to the American embassy in Kabul to seek compensation for the killing of her family.
I'll tell you about Orifa. She had taken a translated description of what had happened to her and her family to the American embassy to ask for help, and had been turned away and told, "Go away, you're a beggar."
The oppressed people of Afghanistan will know the generosity of America and our allies. As we strike military targets, we will also drop food, medicine, and supplies to the starving and suffering men and women and children of Afghanistan. The United States of America is a friend to the Afghan people.
Such a friend that out of $10 billion spent in Afghanistan in the last 2 years, the majority has been spent on the military. Of all the great humanitarian disasters, few countries have been helped less than Afghanistan. Only 3% of all international aid has been for reconstruction. Such a friend that the United States has yet to clear these unexploded cluster bombs it dropped in the center of Kabul, where children play in the lethal rubble. And children are supposed to learn in this devastation. The Afghan government gets less than 20% of the aid that is delivered. Omar Zakawal is a government official in Kabul.
Well, 20% is about 300 million.
300 million? You're meant to rebuild the country, basically, with 300 million.
Oh, no. The government does not have its own resources for the ordinary budget. The 300 million become salaries and electricity and those. No, those are not for reconstruction.
That sounds like you're left with almost nothing, then.
The government has no money for reconstruction, period.
The water in this typical Afghan village may look clean, but it's contaminated, and most of the children suffer from preventable diseases. Since the overthrow of the Taliban, little has changed. For these people, life is just as dangerous. I found the population of 2 villages living destitute in the rubble of this shoe factory in Kabul. They'd fled attacks by warlords who'd robbed them and kidnapped their wives and daughters. I've spent much of my life in places of upheaval, but I've rarely seen such a bombed and blasted and ruined city as Kabul. Most of the damage was done not by the Taliban, but by the Afghan warlords backed and trained and funded by America for more than 20 years, the same warlords who have been effectively put back into power by George Bush. While Afghanistan's liberation from the Taliban was welcomed here and brought certain freedoms, such as the opening of schools and the playing of music, for many people, another kind of terror replaced it, one barely acknowledged in the West. And not only has the government in Kabul no power and no money, the president, Hamid Karzai, dares not leave his office without his 42 bodyguards from the US Special Forces. Real power is held by these men, warlords, whose record of repression and brutality is little different from the Taliban. Many Afghans regard them as no better. For 4 years, from 1992, they fought each other for control of Kabul, killing 50,000 innocent people and smashing the city to rubble. By any definition, the warlords are terrorists, bribed by the Americans with a fortune in cash and truckloads of arms. Today, they control the government in Kabul and have re-established the opium trade, from which comes most of the heroin reaching the streets of Britain. Now Human Rights Watch has broken the silence, documenting atrocities committed by gunmen and warlords who have essentially hijacked the country. Once again, the victims are often women.
Today, women are free and are part of Afghanistan's new government. And we welcome the new Minister of Women's Affairs, Dr. Seema Sumar.
Dr. Seema Sumar is a symbol of Afghan resistance and humanity. She defied the Taliban and ran clinics for women. In 2001, she and another woman were appointed to the new government as the face of liberation. But no sooner had the applause in Washington died away, the warlords were not tolerating such an outspoken voice of freedom for women. Today, Dr. Samar lives in constant fear of her life, with bodyguards with her night and day. No one understands more the plight of Afghan women.
It's not much change for them. They're still, the majority doesn't have access to health care. They don't have access to education. They don't have access to job opportunity.
The liberation of women in Afghanistan is mostly a sham, and their plight is desperate. Since the overthrow of the Taliban, Human Rights Watch has documented kidnapping and the mass rape of women, girls, and boys. Girls' schools have been burned down. In the western city of Herat, women can be arrested if they drive, and if they are caught with an unrelated man, even a taxi driver, they may be subjected to a chastity test. This is Marina, a member of an extraordinary organization called the Revolutionary Women of Afghanistan, which has protected and educated women and documented their repression. We had to meet in secret. The veil was necessary to cover her identity.
We don't believe that there is much difference between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance, or the commanders who are now in power in different parts of Afghanistan, because the origin is the same. They believe in the same thing. Their nature is the same. They are the two faces of the same coin.
Women don't feel secure. The police are generally not functioning properly. Courts are not generally functioning properly. You have places where you have real deep fear of commanders and of armed groups. You have cases where women get taken by armed groups, where people become imprisoned in private jails. You have reports that men and women who are walking down the street get picked up almost at random to check whether or not they're married, to verify that they haven't been having illegal sexual intercourse.
Just a month back, these commanders raped women, and a group of 35 women jumped into the river along with their children, and they died just to save themselves from being raped again.
The starving, the wretched, the dispossessed, the ignorant.